with the man that will be talking to you through talking you through the punches on Saturday night, live on the BBC. That's on 5 Live, that fight. Froch and Kessler on Saturday night. I'm not quite sure at the time. I'm assuming about 10:30ish. Anyway, at the start of the week, he was in a car, in theory, going through 6 countries on that same journey that Mick Hennessy went on. Anyway, that collapsed, and then he had to hold his breath for 24 hours and hope that the volcanic ash vanished and he could get on a plane. He did thankfully get on a plane. I imagine he did a bit of a, all that stuff they get down like Bono does when he flies back to Dublin, where he gets on the floor and kisses the tarmac. So relieved would he have been to being in Billund and actually been there. Anyway, let's talk to our man in Herning, BBC's boxing commentator, Mike Costello. Mick, how are you?
I'm good. No wonder you didn't let me tell the story.
Oh, sorry, son. Well, I had Mick Hennessy on earlier on, and I said, Mick, how was your journey? He went, don't ask. And he forgot. He went through about 4 countries. He missed out about 2, then he kept remembering.
Well, you know what it was like. I mean, all week we've been waiting for a nightmare to happen, and the journey today, Steve, couldn't have been more straightforward. Of all the travels I've ever done, it couldn't have been more straightforward.
Oh, it's just get on a plane, get off bush. We're 20 minutes later in town.
Yeah.
Now, Mick, we played out your interview with Carl Froch, where he sort of that vowed threat at the end about possibly, walking away if he gets stitched up, and he'd have to be really stitched up. But forget the words, Mike. I'm asking you to tell me and tell the listeners, how was he? Is his head in the right place? Because there were some fears earlier this week.
Yeah, he's relaxed. He looks really good, Steve, I have to say. And with the weigh-in coming up tomorrow, he's still got to be careful about what he eats and what he drinks. But he's very close to the weight. And when I spoke to him today about the hassles and the travel, it was typical Froch in a way, Steve, in that he turned it around almost to make a positive out of it, because he said, well, I've had an extra 4 days in Nottingham. I'm a home boy. I love my hometown. I love being around family and friends. I've had an extra 4 days to fine-tune and finish off the preparations. And as you well know, Steve, this last few days, this last week in the build-up to the fight can be really boring, because they've got to be careful, as I say, with what they eat and what they drink, and there's nothing really they can do except mope and lounge around the hotel. So there's less of that. There's less of the boredom factor for him. That's exactly the way he's looking at it. He's turned what might well have been a real negative because of all the hassles into a strong plus for him. He's saying it's actually worked in his favour.
Did you buy that, Mick? Because there was some bad stuff being said, and even a couple of interviews that came out in the papers on Monday and Tuesday suggesting he was unhappy with the situation. I'm going to pull out. I mean, he is a good talker, Carl, and the better you know him, the better he talks. But did you buy into what he's saying, or are you a little bit hesitant?
I buy into what he's saying for this reason, Steve, because he said to them from the outset, if you can get me there by plane, I'm going. If you can't, the fight's off. And that's as simple as it is, Steve. The other factor here is he really wants this fight to go ahead. And you know why he wants it to go ahead, Steve? Because he feels he's in peak condition. He doesn't want another 4 or 5 weeks in training camp. He says he can't bear that. He's worked himself up towards fever pitch. He doesn't want to go away and have to do it again. And the extra hassle, of course, Steve, is this is just not a regular postponement. This is part of a series. So if you postpone this fight for 6 weeks, as they were talking about earlier on this week, then his proposed showdown against Arthur Abraham, which is scheduled for August the 21st, has to be put back as well. And he's very aware of that. So, he is serious when he says that he wanted the fight to take place, but his ultimatum was clear, Steve. Fly me there, or I don't get there, and there's no fight.
Well, he definitely did get there, even if he left a day late. Now, the interesting thing is, I find it quite interesting, is that I saw him about 3 weeks ago, and he was almost on the weight. He was ready. He was next to James DeGale that day, who wasn't too much over the weight, and James DeGale looked chubby compared to Froch. So I know he was ready 3 or 4 weeks ago, so the idea, I agree with you, even 6 weeks would have knocked him for 6.
Yeah, and I was up at the English Institute of Sport in Sheffield, where he's been training with the Great Britain team's elite amateurs who are on the podium squads, and he's been sparring with some of those. And I was there in the middle of last week, and he looked really crisp and really fast. And he looked as if, that had given him a kind of a resurgence, being around youngsters. And he said that he was looking into their eyes and seeing Carl Froch's eyes of 10 years ago staring back at him. And So that's really kind of revived him and kind of boosted his love for the sport if it needed reviving. And I think that, you know, the key is to all these big time fights, Steve, is that you leave nothing in the gym and you arrive at the first bell in peak condition. Now, you know, he's been there often enough. He should know enough about himself to have known how to taper down to get himself in absolutely tip-top condition come that first bell.
Oh, listen, that's going to be great. Mike, what time are we on Saturday night? Do you know?
Well, they're expected to walk to the ring any time between 10 to 10 and 10 o'clock. So that's the sort of time frame we're looking at.
So we're on at something like 9:35.
Yes, we are, yeah.
Mike, listen, I'll see you in less than 24 hours. Enjoy your evening. Get some kip, and I'll see you tomorrow night. Mike Costello is going to be leading the commentary team on Saturday night for BBC 5 Live. Let's take